Welcome back to True Disaster. Today's episode will be 3 separate stories of people who tragically fell to their deaths. So, let's get into the first fatal encounter. Viewer discretion is advised. Vera Mol was a 17-year-old girl from the Netherlands, and it was currently an exciting time in her life. She had been picked to go on a fun adventure-packed holiday in Spain with the company Flowtrack, who pretty much specialise in outdoor adventure holidays for young people, mainly from the Netherlands and Belgium. Although she started off a little bit nervous and shy, after the first few days she was making friends and just having a great time. They would do activities like snorkeling, kayaking, hiking to historical places, and some days were just spent relaxing on the beach and swimming in the ocean. But during their trip, some of the group fancied something a bit more daring, and the organisers within the group decided to take them bungee jumping. Only the bravest of the group would attend the bungee jump, and among them was Vera Mol. The bungee jump instructor was a Spanish man who often worked doing outdoor activities for Flowtrack. Since he was Spanish, his English skills were extremely bad, and sometimes he was very hard to understand. Vera watched as all the other members of the group got hooked up by the bungee instructor and made the plunge. Some screamed with horror and others shouted with joy, but ultimately they all bounced up and down until they were slowly lowered safely to the bottom. After 11 people had gone, it finally came to Vera Mol's turn, and she was as eager as ever. She stepped up to the edge of the bridge and let the bungee instructor do his thing. She turned away and peered over the edge nervously, but also filled with excitement. She turned back around and saw that the instructor had clipped her onto the bungee, but the bungee wasn't attached to the bridge yet. The instructor then said, "No jump," but because of his poor English skills, Vera heard the words "now jump," and without hesitation, she did just that. She flung herself from the edge of the bridge and plummeted 32 meters to her death. After an investigation into her death, it was reported that the company was not licensed to organize jumps from the bridge. And although Spain has no specific legislation regulating bungee jumping, the country's highway laws prevent bridges being used for this purpose. So the whole thing was an illegal activity to begin with. On top of this, Vera was just 17, which is below the legal age of consent for partaking in such dangerous activities, and they should have asked for permission from her parents first. "38-year-old Greg Austin was known as a little bit of a joker and a comedian. He was always the guy pulling pranks and trying to make people laugh. He would especially love to play pranks on his teenage daughter. But as she was getting older, she became tired and bored of all these pranks. In 1992, he wanted to do something special with his daughter, something that they would both enjoy and bond over. They decided between them that visiting and hiking in the Grand Canyon would be the perfect thing. Greg and his daughter arrived at the canyon and started their hike. Inside the Grand Canyon are a series of cliffs, old rocks, and treacherous terrains, spiraling 18 miles down into the Colorado River. A few hours into their hike, things were going great. The weather was perfect and the views were amazing. The father and daughter were enjoying their time together and were bonding really well. But it didn't take long for Greg to turn to his old habits. He just couldn't stop himself from playing a good old practical joke on his daughter. They both stopped right at the edge of a steep drop and were just appreciating the view. But Greg could see a platform slightly lower down, and instantly he knew what he was going to do. He waited for his daughter to start walking off, then he called out to her and started waving his arms around at the edge of the cliff, pretending to lose his balance and fall. Greg then purposely fell onto the platform he saw. But to his horror, the platform was much further away than he thought, and he completely missed it, and dropped 400 meters to his death. His daughter didn't even look back, as she knew what her father was like. She just brushed it off as another stupid prank. But as the seconds turned to minutes, she soon realized that this was no prank. 65-year-old Brian Lathwaite was certainly not your average 65-year-old. He can be described as an experienced and very competent parachuter. After his first dive over 40 years ago, skydiving became an integral part of Brian's life. Ever since he was young, Brian was always a bit of a daredevil. Growing up in the United Kingdom, he developed an early interest in adventure sports, which would soon lead him to his very first skydive. As the years went by, Brian became a prominent figure in the skydiving community, renowned for his skill and daring stunts. He participated in numerous skydiving events and was respected for his expertise and experience. In his later years, he created a skydiving group that would often go out and dive together. But not just this, during their dives they would all meet up in the air and join together to perform certain formations. On June the 4th, 2010, the group of skydivers met up at the Langer airfield. Amongst this group was 31-year-old Emma Bramley. Although she was a lot younger, she was also an experienced skydiver and loved every part of the extreme sport. After catching up and having their coffees, the group headed to the runway and boarded their plane. Once airborne, all of the members of the group made their final checks with their parachutes and other gear, and once the plane reached an altitude of 13,000 feet, one by one the group jumped out of the plane, and just like they had practiced many times before, all 6 of them met up in mid-air and began joining hands to create the formations. After about 60 seconds, it was time to separate and deploy their parachutes. But during this separation, a tragic series of events unfolded. As the group separated to move into clear airspace to deploy their parachutes at around 4,000 to 500 feet, Brian and Emma encountered a critical problem. Emma's parachute was lower than Brian's, and they were converging towards the same point in the sky. A few seconds later, Emma's parachute wingtip contacted Brian's foot, causing her parachute to wind around Brian as it spun violently. Despite the chaotic situation, Brian tried to manage the emergency. Amidst the whirling confusion, his reserve parachute deployed, but due to the spinning, it also became entangled with Emma's parachute. It seemed like Brian was trying to communicate with Emma, possibly to coordinate an emergency landing, but it was unclear if she could hear him. At around 800 foot, the tangled parachute system picked up speed and hit the ground with so much force that Brian and Emma were killed instantly. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, hit that subscribe button. But until the next true disaster, it's goodbye from me.